I see 3 more people coming in. We'll wait till they walk in and then we'll get started. Lucky that. You may not like this, but there's 3 seats on the front row.
Like church, somebody sits in the front. Come last, move to the front.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
All right. My name is Tom Baldridge. I'm the president and CEO of the Lancaster Chamber of Commerce, and I very much welcome you all to this debate this morning for the 41st House District. The Chamber is pleased to offer these types of debates based on our commitment to make sure that the public has an opportunity to hear the views of the elected officials, in our case specific to the business community, but obviously to those things that impact the broader community as well. And quite frankly, I'm thrilled at the attendance this morning, showing that democracy is at work in Lancaster County. So I'm very encouraged by that, and I thank you all for taking the time to come and to learn more about the candidates that are running for office. I also want to thank the Lancaster Tennis and Yacht Club, our host today, for having us here. We appreciate very much the opportunity to be here in your facility and have this debate. We are pleased to have both candidates here today for the debate, and in order to make sure we have enough time to hear what you need to hear, let me get started right away. To my right is Alice Yoder. She served as the Director of Community Health for Lancaster General Health for more than 20 years. To my left is Brett Miller, a Warwick Middle School guidance counselor and supervisor in East Hempfield Township. The questions that we'll be posing to the candidates today will be about business and community issues. And the way it's structured is that we will allow each candidate to begin with a 2-minute opening remarks, followed by around 8 questions that they'll have 90 seconds each to answer. And then we'll turn it over to you for the remaining time, wherein you're invited to fill out these 3x5 cards at your place. And as they are completed, you just raise your hand, and we'll come by, pick it up, and sort through and ask those questions to the candidates until our end time at 8 o'clock. Does that be good? Or 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock. Yeah. Really short debate if you're at 9 o'clock. Yeah. Thank you all very much for coming. Just a few minutes ago, we had the obvious coin toss for the debates, and Brett Miller won the coin toss. He is elected to end the debate with his closing remarks. So in that regard, we're going to be asking Alice Yoder to open the debate with her 2 minutes of opening remarks. Alice?
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, the Lancaster Chamber, for sponsoring this event this morning. I think debates are a great way for the voters to compare and contrast the candidates. It's just unfortunate that it's so late in the campaign that we were able to have this debate. I'm very happy about it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the League for Women Voters had asked us to debate earlier in the campaign, but my opponent chose not to debate. They're a nonpartisan group. I'm not sure why he chose not to debate with the League for Women Voters, but that was the case. But nonetheless, I'm doubly thankful that the Chamber did go ahead and sponsor this. As Tom mentioned, most of my history of working here in Lancaster has been with Lancaster General Health. I've been with them for 25 years, 22 years as a director in the largest business in Lancaster County. And I've been very fortunate to manage budgets up to $10 million and 350 employees. So from a business standpoint, I feel really confident in terms of being able to manage that. From a fiscal standpoint, always come under budget. So I've managed all my budgets, and I really pride myself on coming under budget with all of them. So much so to the point that when I made my announcement that I was running for the seat. I actually had many of my Republican colleagues actually question the newspaper saying, I think there was a typo in there because they listed you as a Democrat. And I guess they felt that there was a sense that Democrats, for some reason, couldn't, be fiscally responsible with things. But certainly my record shows that, from a fiscal standpoint, very responsible. But at the same time, my role at Lancaster General really takes me out into the community. So not only knocking doors to door in the 41st for the past 8 months or so, but also my role for the past 20 years has been with the community out across the county to understand what some of the needs are. So I really take that background and that information with me as I move forward in this particular role. But I really do feel that throughout, for the Commonwealth, I think the main focus should be the quality of public education is first and foremost, stable and reasonable property taxes, and not skyrocketing as over the past years that they have, and developing
We'll get a chance to get to those. I just want to stay consistent with the time.
Oh, okay, all right, and then having a vigorous economy is also part of that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to the Chamber, and thank you to all of you who come out this morning to hear this important discussion. And also to you, Alice, thank you for the work you've been doing as well. This is an important discussion that we need to have for our community, and I'm honored to be here and be a part of this. This morning I want to talk about who I am, what I believe, and why I'm running. I am an East Hemphill Township Supervisor. I've been elected 3 times, and I'm serving in my 9th year. And in my capacity as chairman of the board over the past 4 years, I've helped lead our team through some difficult financial times. We've faced projected multi-million-dollar budget deficit. And through my leadership, what I've done is help lead our team through where we no longer have that deficit, but instead we have a budget surplus. And I've done that and helped lead our team because I believe that government needs to live within its means, just like we all need to live within our means. Government should not be taking more and more money from the people, but rather should be finding ways that the taxpayers might be able to keep more and more of their dollars. That's what I've done as a township supervisor and what I will do as a state representative. Additionally, my full-time work is as a middle school guidance counselor. I'm in my 26th year. I believe passionately in public education, and my experience will give me a unique experience to speak directly to the issues related to public education, and I will be a strong advocate for public schools. As state representative, I will advocate for more funding for our public schools while simultaneously advocating for reforms that help our taxpayers and help our schools. Over the past 5 months, I've knocked on over 7,000 doors personally. I've had thousands of conversations with people. And the concerns that I've heard from the people are these. They want someone who's going to protect the taxpayer, someone who's going to advocate for job growth and job creation, someone who's going to advocate for strong schools that are fiscally and academically sound, and someone who will fix the pension problem. I've tackled all of those issues in my resume, and I want to take those on as a state representative. Thank you.
Could you both please speak up a little bit? It's a little hard to hear from back here.
Thank you for saying that. I should have mentioned that earlier just to make sure. I apologize for that. Okay. Thank you. The winner of this race will begin to serve and govern Pennsylvania at a time when, by all accounts, we have budget challenges. And there's a ongoing debate philosophically as to whether or not we'll need to raise taxes or cut spending or somewhere a balance of both. How do you envision solving the fiscal challenges that Pennsylvania has, and what taxes might you consider raising, and what spending would you consider cutting? And we'll start with Ms. Yoder.
Thank you, Tom. I think first and foremost, reducing the tax burden for taxpayers is number one priority. I would really focus on reducing the tax burden to the local taxpayers, basically by increasing funding from the state to the schools. I would be in favor of increasing education support from a state standpoint to get it as close to 50% as we can. And I would propose a severance tax on the Salah Shale in order to be able to do that. I would also be in support of closing the Delaware loophole and all that money going to the corporate net income so that there would be neutral and that there would be fair taxes across all corporations.
when you look at the budget issue, first of all, my experience in the township as a township supervisor, we deal with $14 million of the taxpayer dollars. And we have to remember that that is not the government's money. That is the money of the people. On the state level, we have a budget issue as well that we're gonna have to contend with. And I would say that when we look at the budget, you need to look at two things. What are driving up the costs, and as well, where are the revenue sources? In terms of costs, we need to reduce the cost of government. And some of the costs are these unfunded mandates. For instance, we need to look at prevailing wage reform, which is artificially driving up costs of public projects up to 30%. We need to look at fixing the pension problem, which is going to bankrupt our state if we don't get that under control. With other unfunded mandates, we need to deal with, because if we don't, we're gonna have a problem. As far as the revenue side, we need to recognize that in terms of raising revenue, that first of all, it's not the government's money, it's the people's money. If there is a need for a tax, that needs to be looked at very, very carefully. There's discussion on the table, as was mentioned, about a Marcellus shale tax. That needs to be looked at very carefully because of the cost of doing business in Pennsylvania is in some regard driving people out of the state to other venues where the cost of doing business is less. So I think from a fiscal standpoint, we need to look at the cost driver side and as well the revenue side, but look very carefully on that, believing, as I do, that government should live within its means rather than taking more and more money from the people.
Thank you. It could be argued that the greatest accomplishment of this current legislative session has been the passage of a significant transportation bill. Were you to have been in office, would you have voted for or against the transportation package? And were you to be elected, what specific transportation priorities would you try to make sure occurred in the 41st district? And we'll start with you.
The transportation bill, I know, was a very difficult bill that waded through the Senate and the House and ultimately signed by the governor. The question was, would I have supported that bill? The answer to that would have been yes. And the reasons for that are many. Number one, as a township supervisor, we have 112 miles of roads in the township that we need to deal with. And I know the cost of dealing not only with the roads, with the stormwater issues, sidewalks, curbing, and all of that goes into it. Very, very expensive. We had to deal with that on a local level, and we're finding ways to fund that. On the state level, I would have supported that because there was not a consistent stream of revenue to meet that challenge, and our failing infrastructure, both in terms of bridges and roads, just was not up to par, particularly from a safety standpoint. So I would have voted for that to find the consistent funding stream to make the improvements needed and to provide safety for the people of this, Pennsylvania.
Ms. Yoder.
Okay, I absolutely would have voted for that. It's been about 15 years since we had a bill, and the roads desperately needed to be fixed. One thing I'd like to say, though, in terms of the first question, I'm not sure I heard a response to what taxes or how we would really fix things. I heard my opponent, Brett Miller, kind of talk about what the issues are, but I really haven't heard a solution. So hopefully sometime in the rest of the debate, he'll actually say, what are some of those taxes or ways to cut a little bit more clearly so that people can understand where your points are. But related to the transportation bill, if my opponent would have voted with Corbett, Governor Corbett originally came out with $1.2 billion to go towards the transportation bill, and that was woefully underfunded. That would not have been nearly enough to actually what finally was passed, which was $2.4 billion that was passed. And that'll just fix our roads right now. I think government shouldn't do everything. One of the main functions of government is to make sure that we have a great infrastructure, and that would certainly be our roads, so businesses can transport goods and services across the county and across the state. So really I think the transportation bill is just a start. I think we need to also revisit it to make sure that we have ongoing maintenance of the roads, because that is not happening, and it's kind of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If we keep going ahead and waiting till the roads and the bridges are ready to fall down, it takes a lot more money then to fix them than it would be if we would have put money and have sort of a maintenance plan. So I would be very supportive of looking at that again to make sure that we don't go back into it in another 15 years before we fund it.
So let me take this second question, give you another 90 seconds for the second part of that original question, which is what local projects, if elected, would you specifically advocate for? And I'll start with you.
I would specifically advocate for, the main roads that have the busiest thoroughfare. I'm on the MPO for the county, and so we have seen some of the priorities. It would be great to get as many of those projects that if you have not looked at the transportation bill and the plan for the county, it is available to all of you to look at to see where those priorities would be, and they're really focusing on some of the busier roads that you need to work with. I would also be a big advocate on, as we fix those roads, that we fix those roads and make them multimodal. I would be very much in support of, when we start looking at widening roads or making them better, that we make them good for not only the automobile, but for the pedestrian and the cyclist. So I'm a big proponent of active transportation, that we can find different ways to both commute and increase physical activity in our community, and I think this is a great opportunity to do so.
Specific projects that I would advocate for, I would have to agree in the sense that for me, as township supervisor, what we've been doing over the past 9 years is trying to address the needs of our local community. On a statewide issue, I would do what we've done on the township level. What we've done on the township level is we have actually gone through our roads and graded them, given them an A, B, C, D, and E, and F. And those that are in the failing capacity, they get top priority. And as I said previously, the main issue that would get first priority would be those that are failing and those that are in putting the public at a most dangerous situation. So those would get the top priorities, and without knowing what that grading level would be across the state, I couldn't answer the specific ones. But from our local, I would try to advocate that the ones that would get priority would be our failing roads and bridges here locally in the 41st district.
Over the past 10 years, energy has certainly become not just a national issue, but certainly a Pennsylvania issue as well. Two questions related to energy. One is, what is your position on the Marcellus Shale extraction tax? And if you are in support of it, what would you like to see those monies directed toward? And secondly, what's your position on the current pipeline project being debated in Lancaster County? We'll start with you, Mr. Allen.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, what as a state legislator might you do to impact that pipeline issue?
Okay. 90 seconds, here we go. All right, Marcellus Shale. It is true that Pennsylvania does not have a Marcellus an extraction tax. That is true. But what is not commonly known or advertised is the fact that South Dakota, Oklahoma, and Texas, those states, they have a severance tax. Pennsylvania does not. But the other states do not have a corporate net income tax, the highest in the land. Secondly, they don't have a capital stock and franchise tax, and they don't have an impact fee. That's not being told. If you take, I would only be in favor of a severance tax if the combined CNI, CFF, corporate stock and franchise tax, and the impact fee and the severance tax, if that makes us uncompetitive, I would not be in favor of it. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's good for business. But if that total tax burden does not make us uncompetitive, then I would look at it, and we'd have to look at the specific percentages. As to the pipeline, I voiced this previously. I'm concerned about possible insurance increases for the people, possible property tax decreases, environmental concerns. If the pipeline goes in, it better go away from environmentally and historically sensitive areas. And finally, on the issue of eminent domain, you need to be very careful about taking public land where it's not a public use, and that need for a public use would need to be demonstrated before I could support that. So my preference on the pipeline would be that pipeline would use existing right-of-ways, thereby you have less right-of-way needs to concern yourself in environmental issues that have already been ironed out.
Thank you.
Thank you. As far, I think I mentioned the extraction tax earlier, that I would be in support of about a 5% extraction tax. As I mentioned earlier too, related to taxes and the closing of the Delaware loophole and how that might help corporations and companies from a tax standpoint, I think that might cover it. So the extraction tax, which they were planning to have added to what they would do in terms of doing business here in Pennsylvania anyway, doesn't seem for the most part as being an issue at that point. So I would be in support of that. The one thing I would note is that one of the mailers that my opponent sent out related to the Marcellus Shale tax is that he basically said in the mailer that he would use the money from the tax, but never really stated that he would tax it. So I think in terms of the words that are being used, I think it's real important for local voters to really look at that from a candidate standpoint. So keep that in mind. Related to the pipeline, I've come out basically saying that I don't feel that there's been a strong case for the pipeline and coming up with a shortcut. I think that what the consideration should be is looking at existing pipelines and thinking about whether they can replace it with larger pipes and or put pipes close to where they are already and using existing right-of-ways. Thank you.
Thank you. It has been said that there is a shortage of by as much as over 100 wanting jobs in the manufacturing industry, looking for people to fill those positions. And yet we continue to hear discouragement about the opportunity for people to find work. What role do you think that the state needs to play in the workforce development issue, and how would you make sure that the state was helping people find adequate employment? We'll start with you.
Thank you, Tom. I guess one of the main things which I was thinking that maybe you might start out with, but you didn't mention, is that under the Corbett administration, Pennsylvania went from 7th to 50th in job creation. So in terms of what's been done within the past 4 years, probably is not something that we need to think about moving forward, because we want to increase job creation, and also our bond rating decreased twice during that period of time. I would be very much in support of businesses working much more closely with some of the schools. There's been a lot of creative work that's been done with that, particularly in the Penn Manor School District in the 41st, where they looked at how does businesses have more of a say and work closer within the schools so that they create workers that are actually fit for the jobs that they want, and that the businesses don't need to retrain a lot of the workers. So I would be very, very, very much in support of businesses doing that in terms of job creation.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
In my career, 26 years as a public school educator, guidance counselor, I have strongly advocated for not only colleges. Colleges are very important, obviously. I have my career because of a college degree. However, what has been diminished in some regard and not given the press that it should have been is the trades. And the job market today is in such demand that we don't have the capacity, both in terms of the training facilities and the like, to meet the demand of the trades. As state representative, I know firsthand of the role of guidance counselors. We just recently had a meeting with the CTCs not too long ago to talk about the concerns of businesses who need workers. I would advocate in working with our schools to make sure that they can promote the CTCs, the Thaddeus Stevens of the world, the YTIs, to train our workers so that they can fill the needs of the employers. The employers, and working together with the CTCs, the YTIs, and the Thaddeus Stevens and the school, can make a very fluid transition if we get those students from where not just the traditional college track that they typically go on, but looking at the trades where we have family sustaining jobs, and they can come out of the training and go right into those jobs without the $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 of debt that many of our students are facing upon their graduation from college and not having a job.
Thank you. Every legislative session, there are bills introduced to eliminate property taxes. And every end of every legislative session, the public still considers property taxes to be way too high. If elected, what would you do about the issue about property taxes? Do you support bills that are currently in play to eliminate property taxes, or do you have another solution, Mr. Miller?
As I said previously, when I've gone door to door to over 7,000 homes in this area, the property tax issue was, without question, the #1 issue that I heard in the thousands of conversations that I had. The issue of property tax, we have to remember, is driven by several things. We're talking about, why are the property taxes so high? Property taxes are high because the cost drivers are so high. We need to look at pension reform to reduce the burden on our schools. We need to look at prevailing wage. That's going to help reduce the cost of schools and other unfunded mandates. As far as the proposals that are on the table about raising the personal income tax or expanding and raising the sales tax, the one thing that I've heard over and over again is this: if we tax that money and increased tax dollars or transition to that, and it goes to Harrisburg, and if we send $1 there to Harrisburg but only get 50 cents on the dollar back, the people have said resoundingly they would not support it. But if we send $1 to Harrisburg and $1 comes back, then I would support it. So the idea of expanding the sales tax and increasing it, or the personal income tax, I would support it if we could go dollar for dollar, going away and coming back to our local communities to help with that property tax issue that we have in this state.
Thank you. So Brett, I've been to 7,010 doors. I'm getting close to that. Definitely want to go out and do some more. In terms of property tax, I would be very much in favor of I think in terms of increasing the state funding, as I mentioned earlier, to education. I think that would be a great relief and be the beginning of property tax relief. So if we increase the state funding and try to get it back up close to 50% as possible, that'll alleviate the school boards having to have to raise local taxes, and there will be some relief at that point in time. And then to do that, as I mentioned earlier too, in terms of consistency of my message, I would hope to start that with the severance tax on Marsalis Shale. The other thing I would look at is, I really heard from the residents in the 41st, is that, you know, they don't like taxes, they want them as minimal as possible, but I did hear a resounding, you know, I'm okay with paying my taxes if I knew what it was going for, and I felt that it was being used the right way. So the whole transparency of what we need to do, I think, is important. The one other thing that I would really focus on is people on fixed incomes. I've heard that resounding. When I go to doors and we have seniors that have been in their doors for 35, 40, have been in their home for 35, 40 years, and they want to stay there because they know their neighbors. I would really want to look at some way that we have greater relief for those seniors so that they can stay in their home.
We talked earlier about the budget challenges that Pennsylvania faces. Without a doubt, one of the largest drivers in that budget challenge is the state of our pension system, both state employees and education, but local pensions as well are in many ways stretched and strapped. If elected, what do you think you could finally do about the issue of pension liability that Pennsylvania faces that stands to be a $50 billion price tag over the next 30 years? Ms. Yoder.
Oh boy, this is a big issue. I like to look at it in two different perspectives. One in terms of the pension debt that we have right now that we need to really look at spending down. I am supportive of waiting a little bit with Act 120 and seeing what it can bring in. This past fiscal year, in terms of the total dollars, it actually about doubled in terms of the money that was invested into it. Came out to about $7.9 billion, which is almost double of what we expected. All that money that comes in from those investments should go directly towards paying down the pension, which would be very different than what was done in the past at the state through the legislature when the economy was really good and the money came in. Hopefully all of you are aware of that at this point in time, is that our legislator chose not to put those additional dollars into the pension and pay down that debt. So kind of shame on them. That's not something I would do with my household budget. When times are good, I make sure I still stock money away. So to make sure that we do that. So this money that comes in above what was expected to pay down the debt, that money should go to the pension and not go into the general fund. And we have to make sure that that's what happens now, which is really in line, which is opposite to what my opponent in East Hempfield did, where with the pension for public servants actually did not fully fund it this past couple of years, which is the same that got us in this hole related to the pension right now.
Okay, first of all, as Township Supervisor in East Hempfield, this is an issue I took on directly several years ago. I recognize that our township has the same defined benefit plan that the rest of the state has, and it was not sustainable. And what I did is I was the one who proposed to the board that we move to a defined contribution system, and we got that passed for new hires. We kept it the same for existing and retirees and current employees, but for new hires, we moved to a defined contribution system. That's going to save the taxpayer dollars, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in the days to come. We need to realize that this is a $50 billion unfunded liability in the state, and it's going to go to $65 billion in just 3 years, consuming more and more and more of the taxpayer dollars. This is a crisis that we need to fix, and we need to fix now. We need to move the entire state to a defined contribution system, and I would recommend that we go the route of the TOBASH plan, which is a gradual system that's going to slowly wean our state off the defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan as we go forward. And the characterization of what was said about not funding our pension plan is absolutely false. We have the very reason that we have the issue that was raised about not funding this issue is completely false. I was the one that recommended that we are the ones who start funding the plan, and we are funding that plan, even though it's a pay-as-you-go system. I'm sorry I'm out of time, but perhaps I can come back to that a little bit later.
Thank you. What would the two of you say to the business leaders here in the room today and to the Chamber of Commerce about the future of Pennsylvania's economy? And what unique skills and priorities do you bring to the legislature that would be aimed solely at improving the local business climate? We'll start with you, Mr. Miller.
Well, obviously, as I've been saying earlier, the answer to what we have here in the state is not just more and more and more taxes. I think if you had a business who was an opportunity to come to one climate where the taxes were X% and another climate where they were less, I think your business would look at the less taxation climate. And I think what we need to do in Pennsylvania is we need to look again at the tax and regulatory burden upon our businesses so that they can be free to do what they need to do to generate profits, which then can be turned back into the business and give job-sustaining, family-sustaining jobs to the people who work for them. I would advocate for a gradual phase-out of the corporate net income tax, which I believe is the highest in the nation. I believe we need to look at ways that we can do some regulations like we've done in East Hempfield Township. We have our subdivision and land development ordinance and our zoning ordinance, which we crafted as a board of supervisors for the specific purpose of giving more flexibility to our job creators so that they could come in and establish their businesses without the extra costs and sometimes unseen costs of establishing their businesses. That's what I've done in East Hempfield, and I think that's what we need to do on the state level as well.
Thank you. I would really focus on trying to decrease the uncertainty to businesses. I think, businesses with all the changes and the rapid change in technology and a lot of what I hear from business as well as in my own business, we're concerned about how do we plan for the future, a year or 3 years down the road, in order to really be able to optimize our profits and create what our customers are looking for. So really the certainty and uncertainty of not knowing what's going to happen related to regulation. So really having good discussions around that and trying to think about how do we sort of settle that a lot at the state level would be something that would be really important. And as I mentioned earlier too, in terms of closing the Delaware loophole and decreasing the corporate net income tax, I think would really be helpful for that in the long run in terms of the business climate. I also feel that a lot of my policies and my focus would be on strengthening the middle class. And I really feel that that's a focus. When we have our middle class being very, very strong, available to work, not on welfare, and really providing good work, skilled jobs, and being there for employers, I think that can really help the business climate as well.
Thank you. Earlier, we talked about pensions as they relate to being a cost driver for both state government and education. But another major cost driver for education is the state mandates that are inflicted on local school districts to face. Often those are unfunded. If elected, what would you do to mitigate the issue of state mandates? Would you support legislation that would allow school districts to waive state mandates? And could you mention any specific state mandates that you would like to see eliminated at the local level?
Thank you. The first thing I think to address unfunded mandates is to really go back to funding education appropriately at a state level. So from an education standpoint, knowing that we need to develop a fair funding formula and then also fund education as close to 50%, as I mentioned earlier, will also be helpful in terms of schools planning. So when we think about the unfunded mandates, I'm not for unfunded mandates at all. I think what happened is that we have our pendulum switching to one side, basically swinging to one side, basically saying that schools need to be more responsible. We need to make sure that our teachers are responsible. So then all this legislation and rules kind of crop up for the schools, and just to make sure that our taxpayer dollars were being spent well. So then we have all these mandates. I think first and foremost, we need to fund schools appropriately. And I would be very much in favor of bringing some of the best and the brightest from the schools across the state together to find out what are these mandates that we also year after year have put on these schools, and which are the best ones that we think are getting the outcome where we have most, our students definitely across the county and across the states that are graduating and that they're ready to work in our workforce.
Okay, as the question is about unfunded mandates. Obviously, unfunded mandates drive the cost of doing business and also operating our schools. We need to look at reducing those unfunded mandates. And I would support legislation that would mandate that if the state is going to enact some sort of mandate, that they in fact pay for it. But as far as whether or not I would support legislation that would allow for local schools to have flexibility with implementing some of these, absolutely I would. Local schools know what's happening on the ground where they are, and I believe that they should have the opportunity and the flexibility to decide what they would want to implement based on their particular needs. So yes, I would absolutely support review of and reform of these unfunded mandates and giving schools more flexibility in dealing.
If elected, what 3 state house committees would you 2 want to serve on and why?
If I am elected, what I would want the state committees would be, I would like to be on the state government committee, the local government committee, and also the finance committee. The state and government, because the state government, I would love to work on reforms in our entire system that not legislators and the entire system needs to operate by, because too many times legislators operate by different rules. We need to work on the state government, local government. My role as a township supervisor, like I mentioned earlier, I've been elected 3 times, and in addition to that, I am the vice president of the Lancaster County Association of Township Supervisors. The township government is something I'm passionate about and would love to be on the local government. And finance, as I said earlier, dealing with the $14 million budget, making our ends meet, making government live within its means. I would like to be on the finance committee to also work on the financial needs of the state.
Thank you. Joe.
Okay, well, I have 2 out of the 3 saying that for you. First would be really at the finance committee. I would really welcome the opportunity to be on that because I really feel, balancing the budget, making sure that we have adequate funding and or not too much would be a key priority for me. The second one would be health and human services. Really, I feel that being a registered nurse, being in healthcare, that would be actually a role that I would really welcome in terms of making sure that there is healthcare that's available, that's affordable and of high quality across the state for everyone here. And then also the local government committees. So one of the things I really enjoy doing in my current job and the work I've done from a community standpoint is look at efficiencies. So how do we actually work with and work with the dollars within our means and look for ways to be efficient in terms of how local government would function as well as government and state agencies across the Commonwealth. I really enjoy doing that in terms of some concepts where we can consolidate some of the state agencies that will actually increase services without, of course, costing our taxpayers more money.
Thank you. So there are a lot of issues facing the state of Pennsylvania right now, and it's fair to say that despite everybody's best efforts, we won't get to all of them. If you're elected, what is the one issue you want to champion and you will not back down on?
Well, my one issue, as I started out, is around education. So those of you that know my background, I am a registered nurse. I'm a hospital administrator at Lancaster General. I've been there for 25 years, as I mentioned. But with the work I do in the community for the past 20 years, and then I really feel that education is the #1 priority. I would really look at funding education, getting that back up to 50%. As best we can. I feel if we get our kids off to a great start is what's going to be the best thing for the economy. It's going to help employers in terms of having a workforce that's ready to work, that you don't need to retrain. And I think it stops that cycle. I work very closely in some of the poorer neighborhoods in Lancaster County, and I've seen firsthand that children, no matter what their background is, it should not matter what their zip code is, that they get a really good education to break that cycle. Some of them have parents that never even read them a book. But we don't want them to be caught up in that same trap. So if we really focus on that when they go to school, that they really learn and are educated and either go to a tech school or a college, each one that's going to give them a family-sustaining job, that would be the focus. And I think we really need to pay closely attention to that, and that's where my energy would be.
For me, while I am passionate about education, and that's so very important to me, the issue that I would want to champion from the state level would be the pension issue, without question. Pennsylvania, as mentioned previously, is facing a $50 billion deficit that's going to balloon to $65 billion. That's consuming a greater and greater portion of our property taxes. And we have already seen that Pennsylvania has had 2 downgrades to our bond rating, which is meaning higher costs for borrowing from the state, which means higher taxes. If we don't get that issue solved, it's going to be long-term problems within the state. So the one issue I would not back down on until we could move everyone eventually graduated transition to a 401k style pension program, which by the way is still very, very generous. That's something that we absolutely need to do and what I would be a passionate supporter of.
Thank you. So now it is your turn. If you have written something down on a 3x5 card, please lift it up and we'll grab it and bring it up for further discussion. While that's occurring, I'm going to ask the candidates one final question from me, and that is, what is your unique leadership skills and style that you would bring to the position to best represent the 41st District, Mr. Miller?
Leadership skills, I think that probably for me would be the fact that, well, my vast array of experience, both as an elected official and as a middle school counselor. I work very, very hard. And one of the things I think people know is that is what I do. I think it's demonstrated by what I mentioned previously about talking to people, listening to people, and I think that it's very clear that I not only state what I mean, but then I lead by example, and I do that through the hard work of what I've undertaken. Whether it's like my coaching, I run marathons, and so I coach track and field. I tell the kids, look, you're doing this because I do the same thing. I work very hard in all that I do, and that's just an example of what I do. So in terms of leadership style, I would lead by example through the hardest of work that I've demonstrated in my career.
Thank you for that question. I really like that. That's a good question. Not that the others weren't good, but that's good. Anyway, so.
Clock's ticking. Go ahead.
Okay, that's right. Okay, all right. So this is actually the core of why I'm running. It's really the core. I think a lot of what I bring to this particular position is that I have twofold. I have been an administrator at the largest employer in the county. So, I have that background from a corporate standpoint. So I know how to move things forward within a corporation. But at the same time, a lot of the work that I've done from the community has been around influencing. So my main role for the past 20 years has been working with various sectors, whether it's the police department, whether it's schools, whether it's employers, or whether it's the faith-based community, to come up with creative solutions to address issues in the community. I have proven leadership around that, where I'm able to come to consensus, and that's what I'm really excited about moving forward. So it's one thing to work in a company, and I've had 350 people that report to me, and their paycheck's gonna matter by what I do. But I've also been out in the community for 20 years working with those various sectors to come to consensus. And I think the whole idea about consensus building and breaking the gridlock that we see currently in Harrisburg, which I've been hearing when I go door to door, people are disenfranchised because we can't come to a compromise. You draw a line, you're either a Democrat or Republican, and we're not coming together. This is the work that I've done for 20 years in Lancaster County, and I hope to bring that skill to Harrisburg so that we actually get things done when we're there. Thank you.
One of the issues that often comes up in the state legislature is the issue of governance, and I'll take two of these questions and kind of merge them. But where do you stand on the issue of reducing the size of the legislature and term limits? Is yours.
Okay, reducing the size of the legislature. I'm pretty much from a business standpoint, I'm a forms follow function person. I'm not sure anybody else in here is like that. But I really look to what is the function? What is it that we wanted to have as the end outcome? What's the end game? And then we work backwards from there, right? So what I would look at is from reducing the size of legislature, what is the main reason to have the number of people that we have currently in that role? And is it to really stay in touch with the constituents within our community? And if we feel that the number that we have, let's just stick with Lancaster County for a while. If you feel that you've seen your representative and you have access to your representative, right now and feel very comfortable with that. Do you think that there's an opportunity to cut that? I mean, when was the last time you saw your senator? You know, a lot of times when I talk to people going door to door, they're not even sure who that person is. So if that's the main reason where we want to make sure that we represent the people in the community, and we think we can do that by that number, if we think we can increase that and cut, I would be in favor of reducing the size of legislature, as long as we know what's the end game and what is it that we need to do to represent our constituents, and do they have a voice, and are we out there enough to listen to what they have to say? That's how I would make that decision.
As far as reducing the size of the legislature, most people, when they ask that question, are really asking about the cost, because the cost of the legislature is so high. What I would do is this. Right now, it's one state representative to about 63,000 people. If we reduce the size of the legislature, let's say by half, then we now go from one state legislator to about 120-some thousand people. Is that effective? Is that increased representation? I would submit that the better way to go is to not reduce the size of the legislature, but in fact to make it a part-time legislature. That way you maintain the representation ratio that you currently have and increase representation. As far as term limits, I believe the most effective term limit is in fact the will of the people voting. But having said that, I would not, because of the abuses that we have seen through the years, I would not be opposed to term limits. And in both cases, reducing the size of the legislature and also the term limit question, I would be willing to get that legislation forward so that being a constitutional amendment, which we all know would have to require a change to our constitution, let the people decide on those two issues and then go with what the people say.
Thank you. So there's been a lot of questions that I've received about pensions, some of which are pensions relative to the state and some of which are pensions relative to East Hemphill Township. So I'm going to try to make this a two-part question. Do you believe that pensions that we should borrow money to fix the pension issue at the state level? If you do believe that, how would we pay off that debt? And if you don't believe it, what other ways could we do to plug the gap that's currently there? Mr. Miller.
Okay, as I mentioned previously, the pension issue to me is the number one issue that we have to address. The question about whether or not we borrow money to pay for the pension obligation, the answer to me would be no, because that's like taking money from your left pocket and putting it in your right pocket. It is just only increasing the cost of the burden that we already have. We can't take more money and fill a void, and then it's just going to increase the cost as it is. So I would not be in favor of borrowing money to pay our debt. That's structurally unsound. What I would be in favor of is what I mentioned previously, similar to what's being proposed on the table, the Tobash bill, which is a hybrid defined benefit plan that gradually moves people to an increasing defined contribution plan over the long haul. Because currently the way the system is set up, new employees, their monies go in to pay for retirees. So if we just cut that off, the money won't be there. So what we're going to have to do is gradually increase that, find a little bit more money in the state budget to fill that void until we're eventually off of a defined benefit plan and onto a defined contribution plan.
I would be I would be really focusing on from a pension standpoint. The one thing that I think is important from the pension at a state standpoint is when we look at the current pension and going through to a defined contribution, that is not going to really address at this point in time what the current debt is around our pension. That is going to take a long time to transition. I would be in support of looking at converting to a defined contribution from a pension standpoint. But knowing that if we convert that too soon and don't ease into that, we're not going to have any money coming in, and we're going to make the debt even worse. So hopefully, a lot of you understand that whole piece. With that, I would not be in support of borrowing money to pay off the pension. I think that we should give some time for Act 20 to work, as I mentioned earlier. Those investments have really increased and will help from a pension from that standpoint.
So the more localized question surrounds cards I got on both sides as to whether or not East Hempfield has a police pension problem or not. Ms. Yoder, would you care to weigh in on your perspective of that issue?
in terms of.
Whether or not East Hempfield, I got a lot of different cards saying that East Hempfield has a police pension funding problem, or it doesn't.
Yes, well, the records that I have and that I've seen, and I can produce them for you, basically says that, the pension plan was not funded appropriately. $1 million short, that was not paid, and I think that's gonna put us in the same hole from the East Hempfield side, just as what happened with the state, during a very, robust economy, and the money was not invested back into the state funding.
Okay, on this issue, I'm glad to be able to entertain this question. First of all, this is not a police pension issue. It is an unfunded mandate that was foisted upon East Hempfield Township by an arbiter's award. And that was before I came on the board. This pension issue, I was the one several years ago who said to the board, we need to start socking away money now to address this pension issue, and that's what we've done. And now, because of GASB rules and what we have to report to the state, those of you in finance understand this, know that we have to report what's considered a liability when in fact it is a pay-as-you-go system. We have the money, right now we have the money, it's a line item budget, we just had a budget meeting last night, you can check this out. We're paying as we go, as retirees go. We are having to fund the post-retirement health care of the people who no longer work there. That was foisted upon us by an arbiter. And so we have to pay that obligation, and we are paying that obligation, and it is not resulting in any structural debt. We have money set aside for it. The fund that we have is at $1.6 million. That does not show up in the GASB reporting. They don't show that as part of the accounting rules addressing this issue. So it is a non-issue. The real issue here is the overall pension system in the state and what needs to be done there, because as I mentioned earlier, if we don't address that, it's going to lead to higher costs in every facet of our state's economy.
Thank you. Do you think state liquor stores should be privatized?
Yes, I do. I believe that the state stores should be privatized for several reasons. Number one, let's be honest, can we point to too much of what government does that has been very, very successful? And I would say that as far as the liquor privatization, I believe that the private sector knows how to do that better. And I would be in favor of privatizing that so that the people who know how to run the business can do it. And I would add one other thing too. This is something that those of you who know, maybe you, some in this room might even be involved with this, that if you want to buy alcohol of some sort, we have people that are driving from Lancaster to Delaware or to Maryland just so they can get their alcohol at a cheaper rate. It's cheaper for them to pay the gas to go there and back and come back with their products why won't we have that revenue staying here in Pennsylvania? So I would be in favor of that, privatizing the liquor.
I would actually not be in favor of privatizing it, particularly in the economy that we have right now. The amount of money would be short-sighted if we would sell the liquor stores. We'd have a lot of investment right now, and again, I feel like that would be short-sighted, which is, I think, one of the main issues that I would really focus on as a legislature is to really do a little bit more strategic planning than I've seen in the legislative government in the past, is where we not only look to what is it that's going to bring in money right now that's going to make us look good as legislators because we want to get elected next time, as opposed to being good strategic planners with having a great vision for our community and then planning out that way, just like any of all of you that are good business owners do for your particular company. So for modernization, there's been some movement towards this already. One of the things we look at is in the past when liquor stores have been put in communities, they're usually put where the lowest rent is and they're somewhere way off where the beaten path. I think a lot now more they're being located right next to a grocery store, so it's a little bit more convenient. People don't have to go too far. The second thing would be is that we should make the pricing competitive. So instead of having people having to go to another state to get the liquor, is to really look at how do we optimize our return on investment to make sure that the money stays here. So that money that's being used and we receive as a state from the liquor stores, that they, it stays there and it helps continue to pay for the services that we have within our community. And the point around government working efficiently, I think that's one of the main focus and things that we should look at from a legislator. Shame on us that we have to say that our government doesn't work well. Our government should not do everything. There are certain things that they should do, and the things that we should do well. And we as legislators should really focus on making sure that that happens and not just complain that government doesn't work well.
Thank you. Now we are going to allow each of you 2 minutes for some closing remarks, and we will begin with you, Ms. Yoder.
Okay, I'm the 20+ loser. That's all right. Okay, well, first, thank you so much to the Lancaster Chamber for giving the voters the chance to learn more about. I think the real difference is, hopefully you felt that we were honest and open. I think that both of us were pretty good at doing that. But as I've traveled around the 41st, meeting thousands of voters and their children, I've heard a strong desire for things to be different in Pennsylvania. Better, more things like the way they were before the poor performance of the current Corbett administration. Regrettably, all I've heard and learned about my opponent this morning is that he wants more of the same. He seems to be satisfied with PA being dead last in the country with job growth. So I guess we can expect, if he is elected, more of the same. He's fine with $1 billion to cuts to education, teachers and educational professionals being laid off, larger class sizes, and elimination of programs such as art and music. So we should be prepared for more of the same. He talks about protecting taxpayers, but the cuts to education dollars coming from the state cause property taxes to rise, and he promises more of the same. He points to his government experience as qualification to go to Harrisburg, while he failed to fully fund the pension for East Hempfield public safety personnel. That is what got us into the pension mess in Harrisburg, which will just give us more of the same. Albert Einstein famously said that insanity is defined as doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get different results. It doesn't take an Einstein to recognize that my opponent offers more of the same of what we've suffered through during the Corbett administration. I offer change, a fresh start. I offer quality education for all our children without devastating tax cut increases, strong support for family-sustaining jobs, and experience of advocacy around affordable health care for all. And I offer a commitment to work constructively with people in both parties to break partisan deadlock in Harrisburg. I ask for your vote, and I would be honored to serve you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hold on. You all get your chance for applause. Mr. Miller.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you, Alice, for this opportunity. You know, this is an important discussion, and we have some very real issues here before us. And I would just say that I don't accept the characterization that was rendered to me. First of all, as a public school educator, I am very much in favor of our schools, and I will be the strong advocate for our public schools. And what was said to me is simply untrue, and I think, quite frankly, unfair. Additionally, what I would say is this. My role as a township supervisor and a school educator is one where I work on behalf of the people, listening to people, working very hard, trying to find solutions to the problems that they bring to us. That's what I've done in my career and what I will continue to do up in Harrisburg. I believe that the people are looking for someone who's going to protect the taxpayer. And that's what I've done as a township supervisor. I believe that people are going to look for someone who's going to tackle the pension issue. And that's what I've done on a local level and what I would do at the state level. I believe that they're looking for someone who's going to be passionate about education, not just someone who talks about it, but someone who's actually done it and will do it. And I believe that they're looking for someone who's going to advocate for job growth and job creation, which is something I've done as well. I have a proven track record. You know, I stand by my record. I do. I work very hard, and I will continue to work hard on behalf of the people of the 41st District. You know, one of the things that we look for people who are serving us in public office, and that are those who have a proven record, who are going to be honest, who are going to be forthright, who are going to work on behalf of the people. That's what I've done in my career. That's what I'll continue to do, and I humbly ask for your vote on November 4th. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alice Yoder. thank you very much for being here today and for contributing to this debate. I know that I'm speaking to the choir when I say please vote on November the 4th, but let's be sure that we're growing the choir by then as well. So do what you can to make sure people participate in democracy in Lancaster County. Thank you all very much for coming.
Yeah, but they're gonna be setting us.